Before refrigerators hummed in every kitchen, America ran on frozen lakes. Picture a time when a single block of ice could mean the difference between fresh meat for dinner or spoiled food in the summer heat. In the early 1800s, as cities grew and people demanded fresh food, beer, and even ice cream, a booming industry was born. It all started with visionaries like Frederic Tudor, the Ice King of Boston. In 1805, he shipped ice from New England ponds all the way to the Caribbean to cool hospitals. At first, most of it melted on the journey, but Tudor kept improving his methods, packing ice in sawdust and straw, building better ships. Soon, ice wasn't just a luxury for the rich. By the 1830s, it became essential for everyday life. Lakes and rivers from New York's Hudson to the Great Lakes turned into giant ice farms every winter. America was literally built on frozen water. This wasn't small-time stuff. By the late 1800s, the ice industry employed tens of thousands of workers and moved millions of tons of ice across the country and even around the world, to India, South America, and beyond. Every January or February, when lakes froze solid to 20 inches thick, the call went out. Farmers, laborers, and strong men grabbed their tools and headed to the ice fields. It was freezing cold, often below zero, but the pay was decent, and the work felt heroic. First, crews cleared snow from the ice so it could freeze even thicker and stay crystal clear. Horses pulled giant scrapers and plows that marked the surface like a giant checkerboard. Then came the cutting. Massive ice plows, invented to speed things up, scored deep grooves. Workers used long saws to cut the ice into cakes, rectangular blocks about 2 feet by 3 feet, and weighing 200-300 pounds each. Imagine the scene. Men shouting over the wind, horses steaming in the cold air, and the sharp crack of ice breaking. One wrong step, and you could plunge into freezing water, but teamwork kept everyone safe. On big lakes like those in New York or Sandusky Bay, a single day's harvest could fill entire train cars. Peak years, places like Stillwater Lake in Pennsylvania cut over 36,000 tons in one season. Once cut, the heavy ice cakes didn't just sit there. Workers used hooks and poles to guide massive floating rafts of ice through open channels toward the shore. There, conveyor belts or chutes, sometimes powered by gravity or horses, lifted the blocks up into enormous ice houses. Tall wooden buildings specially built along the lakes. Inside these ice houses, layers of ice were packed with thick blankets of sawdust for insulation. A well-packed house could keep ice solid all summer long, even into the next winter. Some ice houses held 100,000 tons or more. Railroads built special tracks right to the doors, loading ice into refrigerated boxcars. This cold chain let fresh beef travel from Chicago to New York and fruit stay crisp on long journeys. For city folks, the Iceman became a familiar hero. He'd deliver a block to your icebox, a wooden cabinet lined with zinc and insulated with sawdust, and families would carefully chip pieces for drink, preserving milk and meat. Ice-cooled breweries, butcher shops, and even early movie theaters. America was thriving because of these frozen treasures from the lakes for about 100 years, from the 1820s into the 1920s. This icy empire powered progress. At its peak in the 1880s, ice was one of America's biggest exports after cotton. Companies like the Knickerbocker Ice Company dominated, with hundreds of ice houses lining rivers. It transformed daily life. Doctors used ice to treat fevers. Trains carried perishables nationwide. Summer parties had real ice cream and cold lemonade for everyone, not just the wealthy. The industry created jobs for thousands of horses and men, boosting local economies in cold regions. Clear lake ice was prized because it looked pure and melted slowly, but nature wasn't always kind. Warm winters brought ice famines, causing panic in cities. Still, the harvesters adapted, and the frozen lakes kept delivering year after year. By the early 1900s, change was coming. Inventors created machines that made artificial ice in factories. No need to wait for winter. Then, in the 1910s and 1920s, electric refrigerators started appearing in homes. They were reliable and didn't need an iceman. Pollution in some rivers also made natural ice less safe. The last big commercial harvest happened around the 1920s, 1940s. By then, the roaring industry that had kept America cool for a century quietly melted away. Today we flip a switch and get cold air instantly, rarely thinking about those tough men on frozen lakes. Yet their story reminds us of human ingenuity. What seems ordinary today, cold drinks in summer, fresh food year-round, was once a hard-won victory over nature. The next time you reach for ice from your freezer, remember the frozen lakes that powered America for 100 years. It was an epic chapter in our history, written in ice. Word count, 920. Perfect for YouTube narration with dramatic music, winter visuals and old photos, great for engagement. Braving bone-chilling winds and cracking ice, the ice harvesters were real-life heroes. Many were local farmers who worked the lakes only in winter. They earned about 30 cents an hour, good money back then, but the job was brutal and risky. One slip on the slippery ice could send a man into freezing water. Teams always worked together, ready to pull each other out with ropes and hooks. Horses played a huge starring role too. Strong teams pulled the heavy plows across the frozen surface for hours. At night, workers warmed themselves by big fires on the shore, sharing stories and hot coffee. Boarding houses near the lakes filled with hundreds of men during peak season. In places like Stillwater Lake, over 500 workers and 100 horses kept the operation running non-stop. It took about 100 days to fill the massive ice houses, but in record years they finished in just 11 days. These men didn't just cut ice, they built America's food system. Without them, cities would have faced constant food shortages every summer. American ice wasn't just for local use. Ships loaded with massive blocks sailed to hot countries across the globe. Frederic Tudor's early shipments to the Caribbean saved lives during yellow fever outbreaks. By the mid-1800s, ice reached India, Australia, South America, and even the Persian Gulf. People in tropical places paid high prices for this frozen gold from faraway American lakes. In England, American ice was so famous that a Norwegian lake was renamed Wenham Lake to trick customers into thinking their ice was from America. New York and Boston became ice export capitals. Trains and ships created the first global cold supply chain. This helped develop international trade and showed the world American innovation and hustle. Did you know ice was once America's second biggest export after cotton? In 1886, the nation harvested a whopping 25 million tons. A single block could keep an icebox cold for days. Families used it for everything, chilling lemonade, making homemade ice cream, or even cooling sick rooms. Breweries and meat packers depended on it completely. Clear crystal ice from deep lakes was the best because it melted slowly and looked pure. Kids loved watching the harvest from the shore, dreaming of one day joining the cruise. The motto of one big company was perfect. A block of ice never gets out of order. Unlike new machines that often broke down, the golden era couldn't last forever. In the 1890s, factories started making artificial ice using compressors and chemicals. It was more reliable and didn't depend on cold winters. Then came electric refrigerators in the 1910s and 1920s. Suddenly, every home could have constant cold without waiting for the iceman. Pollution in rivers and lakes also made natural ice riskier. The last big harvest on places like the Hudson River ended around the 1920s. By the 1940s and 1950s, even small farm ice cutting mostly stopped as electricity reached rural areas. The mighty ice industry quietly disappeared, but it had shaped modern America for over 100 years. Today, when you open your fridge or grab a cold drink, you're enjoying the dream those ice harvesters made possible. Their hard work on frozen lakes created the cold chain that feeds our cities and powers our comfort. It's a powerful reminder of human creativity, turning winter into a resource that conquered summer. The story of how America ran on frozen lakes is more than history. It's about resilience, teamwork, and innovation. Next time winter freezes a lake near you, think of those thousands of men and horses who built a nation on ice. If you enjoyed this, like, subscribe, and comment your favorite part below. What other forgotten American stories should we tell next? Share this video so more people discover this icy adventure. Dawn breaks over a frozen lake at 10 degrees below zero. Workers bundle up in heavy coats, wool mittens, and ear flap hats. After a quick breakfast in the boarding house, they head onto the ice. First job, scrape snow with horse-drawn plows to let the ice grow thicker overnight. The air fills with the rhythmic scrape and the jingle of harnesses. By mid-morning, the marker scratches a perfect grid. The real work begins, cutting deep grooves that echo like thunder across the lake. It's back-breaking but satisfying. One wrong move and the ice could shift, but the crew's camaraderie keeps spirits high. By sunset, hundreds of cakes are ready for the ice house. These men were the unsung backbone of American progress. While men worked the lakes, women played vital roles too. Many ran boarding houses, cooking hot meals for hundreds of hungry workers. Farm families supplied horses and extra labor during peak harvest. Children sometimes watched from shore or helped with smaller tasks. In some communities, ice harvesting became a winter festival. Skating, hot cocoa, and stories around the fire after the day's work. It brought whole towns together and created lasting memories passed down through generations. New York's Hudson River and Rockland Lake were powerhouses, with the Knickerbocker Ice Company leading the charge. In the Midwest, Crystal Lake and Sandusky Bay on Lake Erie supplied Chicago and beyond. One bay alone produced 400,000 tons in a peak year. Minnesota and Pennsylvania lakes fed local creameries and railroads. Each region had its own flavor, but the goal was the same. Harvest clean, thick ice and ship it fast before it melted. These local operations turned small towns into economic hubs. Early days meant handsaws and back-breaking labor. Then came Nathaniel Wyeth's horse-drawn ice plow in the 1820s. It tripled efficiency. Ice markers, groovers, elevators, and special tongs made the work faster and safer. Ice houses evolved with better insulation using sawdust from nearby lumber mills. These innovations turned ice harvesting from a small craft into a massive industry. Thomas Edison even filmed operations at Rockland Lake in 1902, preserving the magic for us today. Ice wasn't just practical. Saloons served icy drinks. Hospitals used it for surgery and fever relief. Wealthy families showed status with elaborate ice sculptures. Summer picnics featured real ice cream. Even early baseball games and theaters stayed cool thanks to ice. Songs, stories, and newspaper ads celebrated the Ice King and his empire. It was the cool heartbeat of 19th century America. Not every winter was kind. Warm spells caused ice famines that sent prices skyrocketing and spoiled food across cities. Storms could crack the harvest fields. Pollution from growing factories threatened water quality. Workers faced injuries, frostbite, and the constant danger of thin ice. Yet they adapted, cutting earlier, storing smarter, and using railroads more efficiently. These challenges made their successes even more impressive. By the late 1800s, steam-powered ice machines appeared in cities. They could produce ice year-round, rain or shine. At first expensive, They slowly competed with natural ice. The shift was gradual. Natural ice was still cheaper and purer in many places. But as electricity spread, the writing was on the wall. The old frozen lakes still supplied some areas into the 1930s and 40s, especially on farms. Harvesting ice was mostly sustainable. It was nature's own gift. But heavy cutting and horse traffic affected some lakes. Later, pollution from industry made many waters unusable. Today we see parallels with climate change. Warmer winters mean thinner ice and shorter seasons. The story reminds us how connected we are to our environment and the importance of protecting our lakes and rivers. Though commercial harvesting ended, some historical societies and museums reenact ice cutting for visitors. You can still see old ice houses and tools in places like the Henry Ford or local history museums. Modern ice festivals celebrate this heritage with skating, carving, and storytelling. And guess what? Some craft breweries and restaurants use traditional block ice for that authentic chill and slower melt. The spirit lives on. From frozen lakes to your freezer, America's ice journey shows the power of human determination. For 100 years, ordinary people on icy waters kept the nation fed, healthy, and happy. It's a tale of innovation, community, and adaptation. In our air-conditioned world of instant everything, let's remember those who worked in the cold so we could enjoy the warmth of progress.